Before we start this video, a large thank you to Jakku, Ramanak, Wutanshi, I know I'm butchering that, I'm so sorry man, thank you for the support, Jordan, Nassar, Benjamin, a name I unfortunately cannot pronounce, thank you for the support my man, Duck Triu, hope I'm pronouncing that one right, and Saren Stupidity for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Hello guys, so today we're going to take a break from this knight and we're going to go ahead and make our archer. So I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this gentleman. First I'm going to rename him to Sword and Shield AI. And I'm going to just basically hide that from the scene and duplicate it and rename this guy to Archer. And then kind of show him back in the scene here, or enable the game object again rather. So yeah, we're going to basically just do the operations and the functions for the Archer. And then we're going to use the last episode to polish them both and add things like the parry and kind of tune them a bit. So first I'm going to go over here now into the enemy inventory manager. And I'm just going to basically give him a bow and make sure he doesn't have the sword equipped. And I'm going to, obviously we're going to need the bow because we're going to make this guy fire some arrows at us, etc, etc. So I meant to have this video out yesterday, apologies for the delay, but I've been away from home for a while, out visiting some family, but now I am back, so here we are. Make sure you equip the ammo too. I'm just going to use the arrows that we used when we did archery for our player. And now let's go over to the enemy manager, make sure you set the combat style to archer. Next, let's go to the enemy states. Let's open up the combat stance states. And then what we want to do here, just let me check. Yeah, we want to grab, okay, let's go to the archer, process archer combat style. And let's just start taking some of the functionality that we have in our sword and shield combat style, because some of this will be reused. So let me check real quick. Yeah, so we're going to want to set, obviously, our movement values, and we're going to want to check if we're grounded, and we're going to, if we're interacting, we're going to want to return. If our distance is too far, we want to return the pursue target state. And if we don't have a random destination set, we want to do that because it allows the enemy to strafe. So let's copy and paste it to there. And then we're going to, we don't want to block, we want to be able to dodge. I mean, if you want the archer to be able to dodge, put that there. And if you want the archer to be able to block too, you can put that there. You just need a blocking animation for your bow. Okay, so roll for parry. We don't want him to be able to parry, definitely not, because you can't riposte with a bow. So let's add, I'm just going to copy all this for up to here, and we'll just paste in and erase what we're not going to use. So I've copied this right from the bit where it's allow AI to perform dodge, and I'm going to erase the will perform parry, and we're going to edit the attack function here, because we don't actually need to get a new attack. So we don't need to check if there's a current attack. Let's change this to has ammo loaded. We haven't made this bool yet. This is going to check to see if we have an arrow loaded onto our AI. And then we're going to say if we don't have ammo loaded, let's open up some brackets here. And we're going to say we want to first load. Let's make the bool first, actually, before I get too far ahead of myself. So let's say bool has ammo loaded. And let's initialize that at false, like every other state flag. And then come down here on reset state flags, and we want to immediately change this to false also down here so we don't forget it and have to do it again later, because when we leave the state, everything's got to reset. So let's go up here now, and right here where it says if we don't have ammo loaded, we want to first obviously draw an arrow, or if you're using a crossbow, load a crossbow bolt. That's why I called it ammo, not arrow. Then we want to aim at the target before we fire. What do we mean by that? Well, we want to just not instantaneously shoot the arrow. We want to give our AI a random interval to wait before they shoot, to simulate them having to actually aim at us. So then let's make a private void for draw arrow. And then let's make a private void for aim at target before shooting. So this is actually going to be pretty straightforward. We need to change a couple of things on the item actions of shooting an arrow, but the drawing arrow can stay exactly the same, I'm pretty sure. I'm going to double check here in my notes in a second. But we're going to want to pass the enemy manager, because we will require that to reference the enemy's inventory and stuff. And if we're not two-handing the bow, if the enemy is not two-handing, we have to make them two-hand the bow. Otherwise, they'll be shooting an arrow while using it with one hand, and that's not what we want. So we're going to say enemy.is two-handing weapon is equal to true. We might need to change that on the animator instead, because I can't remember if the enemy grabs the two-handing from the animator or the animator grabs it from the enemy. But I'll check that in a minute. That's okay. We got to make sure they're two-handing it, and then we got to basically set the current item that's being used. So that's enemy.character weapon slot manager. Oh, let's load the weapons first on both hands. Sorry, that's what I meant. So that way when we two-handed it is reloaded, just so the weapon is for sure going to enter the two-handed animation. And then we're going to say has ammo is equal, or has ammo loaded is equal to true down here. And then we say enemy dot character inventory manager, because we don't have a specialized one for the enemy. Then we say current item being used is equal to the enemy.character_inventory_manager.write_weapon, because that is the weapon we are now using, being the bow. And if you want to as well on Nephilim, I make a check here to make sure they're wielding a bow weapon. I added an enum for weapon type, and if they're not, I throw a debug.log saying warning, enemy is trying to use archery weapon but is wielding a melee weapon, or etc., but you don't need to do that. Then we're going to say enemy.character_inventory_manager.write_weapon.two-hand hold RB action.perform action. And I'm pretty sure on the bow, the two-handed hold RB action is the draw and arrow action. So that should be good there now. We can save that. And now if you go here, I have here the two-hand hold RB is draw arrow, and the two-hand tap RB is fire arrow, and the two-hand hold LB is aim. So go to draw the arrow action. That looks good. I think we're all good there on that front. And now let's go to the aim at target before firing. I'm going to make a float. I'm going to call this time until ammo is shot at target equals random.range. And now we have to make two new variables. And you can just use random numbers here if you like, but I like making changeable variables for everything. I'm also going to make it so we have to pass the enemy manager to use this function. So let's go to the enemy manager and let's set up a new header there. And if you want to, since this is only advanced AI settings, you can actually put this on the advanced AI combat stance state, or one of the states. But I like keeping everything on the manager so I can see it very easily just by clicking on one thing, but you don't have to do that. So I'll make a header and call it AI archery settings, public float minimum time to aim at target, and then I'm going to initialize that at 3. And then public float maximum time to aim at target, and I'm going to initialize that at like 6, 7, or 8, whatever you feel is good. And again, you can change this depending on the difficulty of your archers. If you have quicker archers, they'll shoot faster. So put this between the minimum and maximum time to aim at the target. And then it will select a number because we're using random.range between the minimum and maximum of those values, and that will be the timer. And then we're going to say right down here, enemy dot what do we call it? It's not cooldown. Current recovery time is equal to that new timer. That way we won't move to the attack state, which allows us to shoot the arrow until that timer reaches 0. Okay, so let's go back up here now, and you can see if the current recovery time is less than or equal to 0 and we have ammo, we're going to go to the next state. So let's have right here, if we don't have ammo, let's draw an arrow, and then let's aim at the target before firing. That will set the timer, and then because the timer is higher than 0, we'll have to wait before we actually process the attack. So next, let's go to the attack state humanoid script. And what we want to do, you can see here, we only have the state tick. Since we're going to have different functions for the sword and shield gentleman and the archer gentleman, what I'm going to do is copy and paste these two private states, not for their logic, but for their names, because we're going to make the same deal here, where depending on the actions, we give specialized actions to the combat class. So let's erase everything inside these two functions, though, because again, this logic is much different than that of the combat stance state. And what we want to do is copy all of the logic in the state tick, which is our original function, and paste that in the sword and shield function, because that's not going to change. What we have here works perfectly for our sword and shield style combat. So copy that, delete it from here, and then paste it in the process sword and shield combat style. And then like on the combat stance state scripts, what we want to do is basically make an if statement here. And if we are enemy.combat style is equal to combat style sword and shield, and then we return the process sword and shield combat style, else we do the archer combat style, and then else we just return this, because nothing should happen because for some reason there's no applicable combat style, which should never be the case. So that should never actually be the logic that's chosen. So let's do this, and let's do this. Process sword and shield combat style. There we go. And then if I go down here, it's saying not all past returns. Let's just say else return this, and that should be fine. Oh, that's not fine. That's weird. Huh. I'm pretty sure that's fine. Maybe I'm not seeing that correctly. I'm going to come back to that in a bit. I should just be able to put that else statement there, but I'll come back to that in a moment. Anyway, this works fine too. So let's go down to the process archer combat style, and we're going to say if enemy dot is interacting, return. Actually, we can again probably copy some of the logic in the sword and shield and erase it and tweak it. So we should probably check in there. We also have to say if enemy dot current target is dead, we want to just basically set the current target to null and just return this, so the enemy doesn't keep attacking a dead body. That'll just make them stand over your corpse. If you want to, you can also return the idle state, but then you'd have to call the idle state on this script. That's what I actually do in Nephilim. So my idle state is set up so they wander back to their spawn point. So if they kill you, you can just say return idle state. And in my game, they'll just actually wander back to the point they were when they first found you, which looks kind of cool too as the screen fades out. But for now, I'll just type return this. That's just more of a polish element, not really too important for the video. Let's get everything ironed out first. We'll add a lot of those little things when we start doing polish videos in this series, which will be last. So let's go down here now, and I'm just going to, again, look at this logic and copy a bunch of this and paste it there. Yeah, I see we're still calling distance from target here. We can erase that because I don't know if you guys remember, but a few videos ago now, we called all of those variables that have to do with determining targets, distances, and angles on our enemy manager. So we're actually just going to, what we can do is, here, I'll show you, paste that there and put this down here, and we'll say enemy.distance from target. And then we can go up to the process sort and shield combat style, erase this calculation because we don't need to calculate twice, and then just say enemy.distance from target because, again, that is always being calculated on our enemy manager. All right, so now if we go down, that looks good so far. The archer style is pretty simple. We basically just need to fire an arrow and leave the state. So I'm just double checking now to make sure. We need to check if we haven't performed an attack, so we can still use that. Let's paste that here. But we can eradicate attack target and roll for combo chance. We don't need to do that. And instead of returning this, we'll say return rotate towards target state. So let's erase this and erase this. And let's make a new function. I'm just going to put pseudocode here before we make it called fire arrow or fire ammo, just to keep it more, could relate to both a bolt or an arrow. So let's make a private void for fire ammo. Let's open up some curly brackets, bracers, what do you want to call them? Can't speak today. Let's make it so we need to actually call upon our enemy manager. Let's call this enemy. And yeah, I'm just going to say if has performed attack, or if we don't need to say, we already checked for that. We'll say if enemy dot is holding arrow, which is what happens when you use the draw arrow action. I don't know if you guys remember that from our item-based actions. We'll say has performed attack is equal to true. And then we'll say enemy dot inventory manager dot current item being used is, again, the right-handed weapon. And then we're just going to process the two-handed tap RB function, which will make him shoot an arrow. So we'll say enemy dot character inventory manager dot right weapon dot two-handed tap RB action dot perform action, and we pass our enemy manager. And that should be right as rain. Okay. Next, right below that, actually, I think that's all we need for this. Yes, that is all we need for this. So we can minimize that now and call it. Right up here, I'm going to pass my enemy for enemy manager. And now let's actually go and edit the item-based actions to support firing an arrow using an AI. Because I don't know if you guys remember, but right now we need to use a camera to determine the arrow's rotation. We don't want to do that with an AI because obviously the AI doesn't have a camera. So we commented this out because we were doing a good job and reminding ourselves of what we need to do in the future. Right here it says, this will fire the arrow for the player, and down here in this empty space, so copy and paste all this. And right here you can see fire the arrow as an AI character. So if the player manager is null, it must be an AI. So let's see what we got to change. Basically, wherever you see the word player, that's what we need to change. And camera. Okay, so player.camera handler .camera transform local angles x. This is what I mean by this. So right now, right here we have up here to player.camera handler. Let's change this to quaternion.identity. This is when we create the arrow. Let's just keep the arrow's rotation the same as it is. So it'll come out looking straight regardless. And let's erase this if is aiming part and take the logic inside this else statement and just paste that here. So, and we say, instead of saying if player.camera handler at current lock on target doesn't equal null, we can say if character, or actually we'll need to call upon the enemy manager for this. So we'll cast it, just like we do for the player manager. Right up top here, all we got to do is say, so if the player is null, it must be an enemy. So then we can say enemy manager enemy is equal to character manager, or character as enemy manager. We're casting it just like we did with the player. And then we can say if enemy dot current target does not equal null, and we did we can actually reference the current target's lock-on transform, which is in the center of their chest. So I'll show you where that will come in handy. Check this out. We can say right here, enemy.currentTarget.LockOnTransform minus live arrow game object.transform position. All this will do is basically make sure the arrow rotates towards the center of the player's chest, because that's where the lock-on transform is. Make sure you have the lock-on transform at chest level, not at the ground, or else the arrow will fire at the ground, and that will look kind of silly. So let's open up Enemy Manager here now. You can see that the is two-handing weapon here ticks off, but it doesn't actually change in the animator. So if you go here and in the player manager, we can copy it. Animator.setBool is two-handing to is two-handing weapon. So basically, when we update the is two-handing variable on the enemy manager, we want to change it on the enemy's animator too to reflect that. That's what I was talking about earlier. Otherwise, the animations won't play showing the enemy's two-handing weapon. So now on the player manager again too, likewise, we have this is holding arrow equals animator.getBool is holding arrow. Paste the same thing on the enemy manager. Otherwise, it won't actually hold the arrow because it's never updating. And lastly, down here, I forgot something. I just checked the performance to test it. Right here, you can see we're trying to get the force from the player.player inventory manager. We can't do that. We need to use enemy or character.character inventory manager .current ammo, because again, we're using this statement if the player manager is null. So it would make sense to reference the player manager here because this is for the AI. So make sure you just use all this logic here from the AI. You can make this code a bit cleaner if you wanted to by just saying character and using this portion of the code for both the enemy and the AI. But again, I'm just showing you the functionality right now, so if you want to touch it up, do whatever you'd like. I'm going to save that, and that should be good. Let's go back into the attack state humanoid. I'm just going to put reset state flags here when we fire an arrow, just because we're leaving the state immediately after. So wherever we leave the state, actually, I can just put that after we fire the arrow just to be sure. Wherever you leave the state, on any state, add reset state flags. And then back here, I'm going to say, this is on the fire arrow action, damage collider.team ID number is equal to enemy stats manager, I think it is, character stats manager, .team ID number. Do this or the enemy's arrow won't damage your player. That's very important. Save that then. Now we are almost done. I'm going to go back in here. Actually, just going to erase this from here and put it down here instead. I'm going to say if has performed an attack, reset state flags. I was getting some weird behavior here, so I started changing around some of the order here to see if I could fix it. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second. But this part right here isn't too important. I'm just showing you what I was doing in case I forgot to change it back. But basically, whenever you leave the state, just make sure you type reset state flags. And make sure before you fire the arrow, you're checking if you perform an attack. That's all that's really important in this part of the code. So anything else, don't worry about it. But if I come in here, you see he loads the arrow. He takes aim at me right now. And after approximately 4 to 5 seconds, he shoots. That's perfect. But the problem is, look, after he shoots, he's running forward. Why is that? Well, it's because he's actually locked into the attack state. And it doesn't matter how I referenced it. I could never get him to leave. And I'll tell you what happened and how I fixed it, quote unquote. But before I do that, let's finish adjusting these scripts. So back here in the attack state humanoid, again, I'm just going to put this reset state flags right at the bottom and erase that. And I even tried things in here too, like first, like where let's go to the attack state humanoid, and I would say if the enemy is holding an arrow, fire an arrow, thinking that maybe that was locking it up somehow, but no, that wasn't the case, so that's not important. Jump back to the attack state humanoid script again, and when we're checking for return pursue target state, reset state flags before you leave. That's actually important. So if we're leaving that state, reset state flags. Now back on the combat stance humanoid script again, if we're returning the pursue target state, make sure you reset state flags. So you'll see here now, if I go back to the attack state humanoid, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over again actually to the process archer combat style. I've not changed anything. I put all these debug logs here for attack 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just checking to see if the code reaches this point. And as you can see at the end, I have this return rotate towards target state. Now, if I go back to the game, you can see the code is definitely getting there, but yet he's still locked in the attack state. What's weird is if I actually go to this character and manually drag in the rotate towards target state, boom, he fires an arrow, just like that. I could not for the life of me figure out what was happening here. It was only happening in this Unity version. It was not happening in my prototype project. No idea why. Again, if I drag the state in, he goes in there. But the state won't actually change via code. So what I did was, first off, erase get new attack. We don't need that. That's just dead code in this part of the project for the archer. And also for else here, the reason why it wasn't working is because I didn't put return before these two lines of code. So you need to say return process shortened shield, return archer, and then return this. Now that'll work. But anyway, what I did to work around this, was basically, I'm going to show you actually instead of just saying it, that'll give you a better explanation. So let's minimize the project, go to all of your states, highlight them all, and delete the game objects. Go to enemy states and add in order. This is important that you put the idle state first. Everything else doesn't matter. So the humanoid idle state, because this is our starting state. Basically, whatever your starting state is, put it first. Then put every single state back here, just like this. So mine in this order will be idle, pursue target, combat stance, attack state, rotate towards target again. Idle being the first because it is the state I start on. Fill in all the parameters. Don't drag in like this. Like, don't drag in the variables like this because that won't work. But what will work for some reason, and I can only repeat this with this project, not entirely sure why. If you guys have any ideas, please, I'm all ears because this is actually kind of funny. I brought it up to 6 people and we can't find a rhyme or reason to it. It might just be a Unity bug at this point in this particular build. But go to awake and call each of the variables on awake. So get component, pursue target state, and then for example on the pursue target state you would say combat stance state equals get component combat stance state humanoid. For whatever reason, calling all these variables on awake instead of manually dragging them in via the inspector, again I can only get it to work like this for this project. I don't know why it's doing this. It causes it to work. I checked to see if the references were basically not the references I was trying to reference via the code. I checked to see if there was, maybe I was accidentally referencing a duplicated states in the scene from another AI. That wasn't the case. I checked everything that I could think of, and I even checked the root name of the game object on each of the scripts to make sure it wasn't just some random script I had dragged in an accident from somewhere else. None of that was the case. It only worked when I used awake. Now it's definitely possible there's an oversight that I'm not seeing somewhere. That's why I'm asking you guys if you know potentially something I'm overlooking. I'm all ears, but calling them on awake works fine and fixes the problem. And for whatever reason too, this problem was only an issue with the attack state. It would change out of a state in any other script I made, just not the attack state. Very odd. But if you put all these on awake, if you were experiencing the same problem as me, and then call it this way, then when we go back into the game, you should now have a fully functioning archer. We are going to add quite a bit of polish to this gentleman, doing things like arrow canceling and re-quivering the arrow if something is too far away. Because right now they just draw the arrow and they have it out until they fire it at you. So we're going to add a few more little cool effects to it, but I just wanted to get it into a working state. So now if I go into the game here, drag in the first state, which is the idle, and now if I run in at this gentleman, he'll draw an arrow and he'll shoot it at me. I have the timer very low right now, so that's why he's firing it instantaneously because I was testing it. It's like a second. We do have a problem though. If I let him hit me, you're going to see that it's going to shoot me and it's going to float in the air. And why is this? This is because, I don't know if you remember, I believe we set up individual limb colliders on our enemy but not our player, but because we don't have them on our player, it just floats in the air and hits the collider on our character. We're going to fix that too. We're going to make it so wherever the enemy shoots our character, an arrow will stick out of that area of the body, whether it be the helmet, the body, the legs, etc., etc. So the next episode in this series will be polishing the knight and the archer and their behaviors and adding the parry function to the knight as well. The video will probably be a little bit longer because I want to cover a lot in that one, so maybe 25, maybe even 35 minutes. As usual, if you guys made it this far, thanks for watching. Be sure to drop a like, leave a comment. It does help out my channel so much, and I appreciate every single one of you that do that and take the time to do that. It means a lot to me. And a thank you to my patrons. I will see you guys in the next episode.